My name is Sienna Parker, and the exact second I stopped being my parents' emotional punching bag happened under a glittery Happy New Year banner in their dining room when my father slammed his champagne flute down and barked, "Tell your mother she's the reason I'm broke." And my mother snapped back, "Tell your daughter the truth. You married me for the trust." Everyone laughed at first, because rich people always sound like they're joking when they're being cruel. Then I set my phone on the table, tapped one file, and said, "Before you fight over who gets my sympathy, you're going to fight over who pays back what you stole." My father scoffed. "Oh my God, not tonight." I looked him dead in the eye. "Actually, especially tonight." Then I pressed play. A recording filled the room, tiny, tinny, unmistakable. A child's voice. Mine. "Mom? Dad? I'm hungry." And then my mother's voice, sharp and distracted. "Make cereal. We're busy." My father's voice, laughing like it was nothing. "She'll be fine. Lock the door." The room didn't just go quiet. It went wrong, like everyone's body realized at the same time that this wasn't a family argument anymore. This was evidence. And when the trustee's attorney stepped out of the hallway, because I'd invited her holding a folder with my parents' names on it, my mother's face drained so fast, I thought she might actually faint. The lawyer cleared her throat politely and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, I'm here to serve notice. The trust distributions are suspended, effective immediately." My father's mouth opened. No sound came out. My mother's hand flew to her necklace, like it could protect her, and I finally said the sentence I'd been carrying since childhood. "You don't get to use me as a prop in your marriage anymore." If you've never been raised by two people who loved money more than they loved you, you might think the trauma is loud. It isn't. It's quiet. It's eating dinner alone, while your parents talk. Behind a closed door talking isn't really the word. It's more like two animals circling a carcass. It's learning how to sign your own permission slips because nobody's around. It's keeping your backpack packed like you might have to leave at any moment, even though you don't know where you'd go. It's becoming your own adult before you can legally vote. My parents didn't hit me. They didn't scream in public. They didn't show up drunk to my school. They did something more American, more socially acceptable, and somehow more poisonous. They acted like providing a house counted as parenting, and they acted like my feelings were an inconvenience that interrupted their financial strategy. My father, Graham Parker, was born with charm and ambition, and absolutely no ability to sit with discomfort. If there was an emotion in a room, sadness, guilt, fear, he needed to either sell it, spin it, or outrun it. My mother, Lynette Parker, was polished, controlled, the kind of woman who could smile at a charity gala while crushing someone with a sentence that sounded like a compliment. Together, they made the kind of couple people envy from a distance, at least until you got close enough to hear the math behind the marriage. They met in their late 20s. That's the story they told at dinner parties. Fate, chemistry, timing. The real story, one I learned later, was that my father was drowning in debt from a failed investment, and my mother had an inheritance tied up in a family trust that required her to be married by a certain deadline. They didn't fall in love. They formed an alliance, and then they had me because the trust required a family unit, and because a baby looks great in Christmas card photos. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a neighborhood full of trimmed hedges and SUVs, and people who used the word blessed like it was a brand. From the outside, we were perfect. Inside, my childhood felt like living in a house that was always being staged for someone else. I learned early that if I cried, my mother got irritated. If I asked questions, my father got sarcastic. If I needed comfort, they acted like I was asking for money. So I stopped needing things, or at least I stopped showing it. When I was 8, I could pack my own lunch, do my own laundry, and make macaroni without supervision. When I was 10, I knew which neighbors' porch lights meant their home. When I was 12, I had a hidden stash of granola bars in my closet, because I never knew if dinner would happen. My parents weren't gone physically. They were gone emotionally. They lived in the same house, and treated me like background. And the weirdest part was how they used me when it benefited them. When my father needed to look like a family man for a promotion, he'd show up at a school event, squeeze my shoulder too hard, and say, "That's my girl," like he knew who I was. When my mother needed to win a social battle with her friends, she'd parade me around like a trophy straight A, report card in hand, then ignore me for 2 weeks afterward. I became fluent in performance, and I became even more fluent in their fights. My parents fought the way people fight when they're not actually arguing about the dishes. They fought about tone, respect, stress, timing, but the real argument was always the same. Who was winning the marriage? Who was getting more money, more leverage, more sympathy? And I was always the thing they used to tip the scale. If my mother wanted to punish my father, she'd say, "Sienna doesn't even feel safe around you." And then she'd look at me, waiting for me to nod, like a trained dog. If my father wanted to punish my mother, he'd say, "Sienna can tell you how cold you are." And then he'd smile at me like we were on the same team. I learned to say what would end the fight fastest. I didn't realize until adulthood that my peacekeeping was just a child doing emotional labor for two selfish adults. I left for college the second I could. Scholarship, student loans, 2 part-time jobs, whatever it took. I went to UNC Charlotte, not because it was glamorous, but because it was far enough to breathe and close enough that I didn't feel guilty. Because guilt was the only thing my parents ever successfully gave me. In college, I did what neglected kids do when they finally get a little freedom. I became terrifyingly responsible. I studied like my future depended on it, because it did. I worked at a coffee shop early mornings, and I tutored in the afternoons, and I took internships in the summers. I built a life that didn't require anyone to pick me, and by 26, I had a stable job as a project manager for a healthcare tech company, a small apartment that felt like peace, and a bank account that no one could touch. That should have been the end of the story, except my parents didn't lose interest in me when I left. They lost interest in me when I stopped being useful, and then they found a new use. It started the year I got promoted. I posted a simple photo on LinkedIn, Temi in a blazer, smiling, holding a little Employee of the Quarter plaque, like a nerd. Within 24 hours, my father called. He didn't say congratulations. He said, "So you're doing really well now." That was it. That was the whole opening. Like my success was a faucet he could turn. I laughed awkwardly, because that's what you do when you're still hoping your parents will act like parents. "Yeah," I said. "It's been a good year." He sighed dramatically. "Must be nice." Then the first request came, not even direct. It was always wrapped in morality. "Your mother has been under a lot of stress," he said. "She's not handling things well. You know how she gets. It would mean a lot if you talked to her." He wasn't asking me to be a daughter. He was asking me to be his therapist. So I called my mother. She answered on the 3rd ring, breathless like she'd been waiting for the moment to unload. "Your father is impossible," she said immediately. "He's reckless. He's selfish. He's draining everything." I leaned back on my couch, staring at my ceiling fan like it might save me. "Hi, Mum," I said. "Oh, Sienna, don't hi me. You have no idea what I deal with." And then it happened, the thing that became my new normal. My parents didn't call to ask about my life. They called to recruit me, to validate them, to make the other one feel small, to collect sympathy, like it was a currency. At first, I tried to handle it like an adult. I suggested counselling. I suggested boundaries. I suggested, very gently, that they were both treating each other like enemies. My father would laugh and say, "You're too young to understand marriage." My mother would sniff and say, "Don't psychoanalyze me." Then, slowly, they shifted, from emotional requests to financial ones. My mother started dropping hints. "The mortgage is ridiculous right now. Interest rates are insane. You're lucky you're not tied down like this." My father started making jokes. "Wish I had a rich daughter to bail me out." They'd never ask straight out at first. They'd just make the room smell like obligation. The first time my father asked directly was right before Thanksgiving. He called while I was at Target buying candles, like a woman trying to pretend she had a normal life. "Sienna," he said, voice unusually soft. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. My stomach tightened. It always did when he used that tone. "What's going on?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "I made a mistake. A business thing. It's temporary. I just need a bridge. Just until January." "A bridge," I repeated. 10 grand. He said quickly, like saying it fast would make it smaller. "I'll pay you back. I swear." I stood in the aisle between throw pillows and holiday decor, my cart full of things I didn't need, and felt 8 years old again, trying to calculate what would keep the adults from exploding. I don't have 10 grand to just I started. You do, he interrupted. You're doing great, and I'm your father. That sentence hit me like a slap, not because it was true, because it was the first time he'd used the title as a weapon, out loud. I told him no. I tried to say it kindly. I said I had savings goals. I said I could maybe help with a smaller amount. He went cold instantly. So that's who you are now, he said. You got your little career, and now you're above family. I swallowed hard. Dad, that's not... No, he snapped. I get it. Don't worry about it. He hung up, and I sat in my car afterward and cried not because I wanted to give him money, but because that old part of me still wanted him to mean father when he said the word. 2 days later, my mother called. And this is how you know your parents are using you. She didn't ask if I was okay. She asked what my father had said. He called you, didn't he? She said. Hi, Mum. I tried again. Oh my God, Sienna, she hissed. Don't do that. Don't act like we're strangers. Your father is trying to manipulate you. I stared at my steering wheel. Did you call to warn me? Or to collect information? Silence. Then, excuse me? I felt my heart pounding. Because I didn't talk to my parents like that. I never had. But something inside me, some hidden muscle, was starting to wake up. Mum, I said carefully, I'm not doing this. I'm not passing messages. I'm not picking sides. Her voice sharpened. So you're abandoning me too? There it was, the word that always worked on me. Abandoning, as if a child can abandon the people who left first. I whispered, I'm not abandoning you. Yes, you are, she snapped. You're leaving me alone with him, just like always. You don't understand what it's like to be married to someone who only cares about money. I almost laughed. The irony was so sharp it hurt. Because she was married to him for money too. I didn't say that yet. I wasn't ready, but I felt something shift. A tiny click, like a lock deciding it didn't trust the key anymore. That Thanksgiving, I went home anyway, because part of me still believed there was a version of family where you show up, eat pie, and pretend the past doesn't matter. The house looked like a magazine spread table set with linen napkins, candles, a centerpiece that probably cost more than my grocery bill. My mother hugged me stiffly. My father kissed my cheek like a politician. They smiled for exactly 3 minutes. Then the knives came out. My father criticized the turkey too dry. My mother criticized the wine too cheap. My father complained about her spending. My mother complained about his projects. And then, like always, they turned to me. Tell her, my father said, leaning back with that smug half-smile. Tell her I'm not the villain. My mother turned, eyes sharp. Tell him he's not a child. Tell him he can't gamble with our future. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. I looked around the table at the other relatives, an aunt, a cousin, everyone pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. This was their favourite sport. Public humiliation disguised as conversation. And I realised, sitting there in my grown woman body, that I was still being used as the referee of a game I never agreed to play. So I did something small. I put my fork down. I'm not doing this, I said. My mother blinked like I'd spoken French. Not doing what? I'm not mediating, I said. I'm here to eat dinner, not translate your marriage. My father chuckled. Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. My mother's smile tightened. Sienna, don't embarrass us. That word, embarrass, not, are you okay? Not, do you want to talk? Just, don't embarrass us. I swallowed my anger and sat there, quiet, because I still didn't know how to fully fight them. But later that night, in the guest room I grew up in, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and thinking about the weirdest truth. My parents didn't raise me. They trained me to manage them, to soothe them, to keep them from looking bad. And then, the next morning, I found the envelope. It was on the kitchen counter, half hidden under a stack of mail. Thick paper, formal, not addressed to me, addressed to Lynette Parker and Graham Parker. In the corner, Harper and Wainwright Trust Services. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe because neglected kids become excellent at noticing what adults try to hide. Maybe because my mother had always snatched mail out of my hands when I was young, like she was guarding state secrets. I turned it over. It wasn't sealed yet. I know what you're thinking. Don't open other people's mail. I didn't open it. I just slid the paper out enough to see the first line. And I read, Annual Distribution Review. Family Compliance Verification. My chest went cold. Compliance? Family compliance? Like their marriage was a contract. Because it was. I slid the letter back in, put it down exactly where it was, and walked to the sink as if I was just getting water. But my mind was already running. Trust, verification, family, compliance. And in that moment, something from my childhood clicked into place. Something my brain had filed away as adult stuff, because it didn't make sense at the time. I remembered being 9 and hearing my mother hiss to my father in the hallway, "Just make it to 25 years. That's all we have to do." I remembered my father saying, "Den vous êtes." I remembered the way they both noticed me standing there and instantly changed the subject. I had assumed they meant marriage in general. Now I knew they meant a payoff. After I drove back to Charlotte, I couldn't let it go. The hardest part of being raised by emotionally absent parents is that you're always gaslighting yourself. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe I misheard. Maybe it's normal. Maybe I'm being dramatic. But I'd learned something in my job. When something doesn't add up, you don't ignore it. You investigate. So, I started investigating my own childhood. I requested my school records attendance, nurse visits, counsellor notes. I reached out to my old neighbour, Mrs. Collins, who used to slip me snacks and ask, quietly, if I was okay. I found my childhood journals in a storage bin my mother had dumped on me after college, like it was trash. And then I did the thing that changed everything. I pulled my credit report, because if my parents were willing to marry for money, they were willing to do worse. And sure enough, there it was. 2 old accounts I didn't recognise, opened when I was 19, closed now, but not cleanly. A phone plan, a store credit card, both tied to my social security number. I sat at my kitchen table, with my laptop open, hands shaking, feeling that same childhood helplessness, but now, it wasn't helplessness. It was rage with a direction. I called the companies. I got dates, addresses, signature, and when I asked for the mailing address used at the time, it was my parents' house. My throat tightened so hard I had to stand up and pace. They didn't just neglect me. They used me, even when I wasn't in the room. Then I searched Harper and Wainwright Trust Services and found a generic website with a phone number. I didn't call immediately. I did one more thing first. I called my maternal aunt, my mother's older sister, June. June had always been the relative who looked at my parents with a kind of polite disgust, like she could see the rot under the paint. She answered with a tired voice. "Sienna?" "Hi," I said, and my voice cracked, because suddenly I felt like a little kid again. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." There was a pause. Then June sighed deep, resigned. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "What did they do?" That question told me everything. I swallowed. Was there a trust? Something tied to my parents staying married? Silence. Then June said, very quietly, "Yes." My chest burned. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I whispered. June's voice tightened. "Because your mother didn't want you to know you were part of a contract." I squeezed my eyes shut. June kept going, gentle but blunt. "Your grandfather, my dad, was a smart man, but he was also naive about your mother. He believed she'd mature. He believed marriage would settle her." My throat felt raw. "What were the terms?" June hesitated. "I don't remember every detail, but I remember the big one. The one your mother hated." I leaned forward like the words could save me. It required them to maintain a stable household and raise their child. Not just have a kid, raise one. A sick laugh bubbled up in my chest. It wasn't funny. It was absurd. "A stable household," I repeated. June's voice turned bitter. "Your mother used to complain that the trust had moral language. She said it was insulting." I stared at my laptop, at my adult bills, at my calm little apartment that I built myself. "Do you know who controls it now?" I asked. June exhaled. "A trustee. Professional, not family. Your grandfather didn't want your mum charming her way into control." My brain snapped into focus. "Do you know the name?" I asked. June hesitated. Then, "Harper and Wainwright." I closed my eyes. Of course. I thanked June, hung up, and sat there in silence, feeling something new. Not grief, not even anger, Clarity, because if the trust had rules, then the trust had power. And if my parents' entire marriage was built on money, then money was the one language they'd finally understand. December rolled in with that weird American blend of stress and sparkle, office holiday parties, travel chaos, people posting matching pajama photos like we all live in the same movie. My parents, naturally, decided to host New Year's. They framed it like a family tradition. It was actually a performance, a house full of witnesses, a perfect time to show the world that the Parkers were thriving. My mother texted me a photo of their table, set in gold chargers, champagne flutes, a banner that said, "Cheers to 2026. Like it was an ad. "Can't wait to have you here," she wrote. "We need family. Need. Not want. Need." My father called 2 days later, voice fake warm. "Hey kiddo, you coming?" "Yeah," I said. He sounded relieved, then immediately shifted into business. "Good, because your mum's been spinning, and I'm not doing this alone." I clenched my jaw. "I'm not mediating." He laughed. "Nobody said mediate. We just need you to be reasonable." Translation: be on my side. My mother called that night and said, "Don't listen to your father. He's trying to manipulate you." Translation: be on my side. And that's when I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. My parents weren't fighting to save their marriage. They were fighting to win me, because whoever won me got to feel justified. And more importantly, whoever won me could try to use me. So I made a plan, not a screaming match plan, not a revenge movie plan. A quiet, boring, devastating plan. Step 1. I contacted Harper and Wainwright. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't rant. I used my calm, professional voice. "My name is Sienna Parker," I said. "I believe I'm the beneficiary, referenced under a family compliance clause. I'd like to request information regarding my rights to documentation." There was a pause, papers shuffling, a woman's voice. "1 moment, Miss Parker." When she came back, she said, "Yes, we can schedule a meeting. We'll need to verify identity." I laughed softly. "Trust me, I can verify." Step 2. I gathered evidence. Not dramatic, I feel neglected statements. Hard stuff. School attendance records showing I was tardy constantly because no one drove me. Counselor notes describing frequent anxiety and lack of parental engagement. Emails from teachers to my parents that went unanswered. The nurses log me coming in with headaches, stomach aches, asking for crackers. My childhood journals, pages where I wrote things like, "I made dinner again. Mom didn't come home. Dad forgot." And then the biggest one, a statement from Mrs. Collins, my old neighbour, who wrote at my request what she witnessed. Me locked out, me alone, her feeding me, her calling my mum, and being brushed off. Step 3. I set the stage. If I confronted my parents privately, they'd rewrite the story. They always did. So I chose a public moment they couldn't control without showing their ugliness. New Year's Eve, their favourite holiday for pretending. I RSVP'd yes. I packed my suitcase like a normal daughter, and in the side pocket, I tucked a folder that felt heavier than paper. It felt like the childhood I never got. New Year's Eve in Raleigh was cold, but not snowy, the kind of winter that smells like wet pavement and chimney smoke. Their house looked like a lifestyle influencer lived there. White lights wrapped around the porch columns. Wreath on the door, candles glowing in every corner like my mother was trying to perfume the truth out of the air. People were already there when I arrived. My mother's friends from her charity board, my father's golf buddy and his wife, a few cousins who didn't know the real story because my parents only ever shared the glossy version. My mother kissed my cheek. "There she is," she said brightly. "My girl." My father hugged me. "Look at you," he said. "Big city career." It was like being complimented by strangers who knew your resume, but not your soul. I smiled. I played nice. I helped with appetizers, like I hadn't spent the last month building a case against them. Because here's the thing, people like my parents rely on your emotional reaction. They need you to explode so they can call you unstable. So I stayed calm. At 11:15, my father's mood started slipping. You could always tell when he'd had enough to drink, to stop pretending. He started making little digs at my mother about her spending, her image, her friends. My mother responded with sharp little jabs about his business ventures, his ego, his failed ideas. The guests laughed awkwardly. My parents loved an audience, even for fights. At 11:40, my mother cornered me near the kitchen and whispered, "Your father has been asking me to borrow money from the trust distribution." My face stayed neutral. "What trust distribution?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be cute." I leaned in slightly. "Don't be dishonest." Her lips tightened. She recovered quickly, because she always did. "I'm just saying," she hissed. "He's reckless. And if he drags us down, you'll be dragged down too. You should talk to him." "Mom," I said softly, "I'm not your mediator." Her smile turned brittle. "God, you've gotten so cold." And I realized she actually believed that. She believed my boundaries were cruelty. At 11:50, my father cornered me near the bar and said, "Your mother's been lying to you. She's the reason things are tight." I sipped water. "I'm not doing this." He smirked. "You always run from hard conversations." I looked at him, and something in me didn't flinch. "No," I said quietly. "I run from manipulation." His eyes flashed. "What's your tone?" And then, like a magic trick, he pivoted. "Sienna," he said, voice suddenly softer. "I'm your dad. I've been struggling. If you could just help me, I could stabilize things. Then everything calms down. Your mum stops acting insane. We all win." There it was, the pitch. I stared at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel scared of losing his approval, because I never really had it. I said, "Okay." His face lit up. He thought he'd won. Then I added, "I'll help you tell the truth." At 11:58, my mother clinked a spoon against her champagne glass, smile bright like a commercial. "All right, everyone," she called. 2 minutes. Let's gather." People moved into the dining room, glittery hats, phones out, ready for the countdown. My mother raised her glass. My father put his arm around her, like they were in love. I stood at the end of the table, calm, watching. "Before we count down," my mother said, "I just want to say how grateful I am. For family, for everything we've built." My father squeezed her waist too hard, smile fixed. "And I'm grateful," he added, "for forgiveness, for second chances, for not holding grudges." Poop. I almost laughed. Then my cousin cheered. "Speech." My mother's eyes flicked to me. "Sienna," she said brightly, "say something. Tell everyone what you're grateful for." There it was. The trap? If I played along, they'd keep the narrative. If I refused, I'd look like the ungrateful daughter. So I smiled and said, "Sure." My mother's smile widened. My father's eyes gleamed. I set my phone on the table. I looked around at the guests and said, "I'm grateful for the truth." A few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. My mother laughed too loudly. "Oh, Sienna, always so dramatic." I tapped my screen. The recording played. "Mum, Dad, I'm hungry." My mother's face froze. My father's smile faltered. The room shifted, confusion first, then discomfort. The recording continued. My mother, "Make cereal. We're busy." My father, "She'll be fine. Lock the door." Someone's laugh died in their throat. A woman near the window whispered, "Is that?" I held up a hand gently. "That's me. Age 9. My mother lunged forward, whisper hissing, "Turn that off." I didn't, because this wasn't about embarrassing them. This was about removing their mask. I looked at my parents and said, "Clear and steady. You spent my entire childhood treating me like a requirement you had to maintain, not a person you had to love." My father snapped. "That is insane." My mother's voice went sharp. "You're doing this for attention." I nodded, like I was taking notes. "You always say that when I speak." Then I reached into my bag and slid a folder onto the table. Not aggressively, just decisively. "I met with the trustee," I said. "Harper and Wainwright. The trust you've been pretending doesn't exist." My mother's eyes widened for half a second, pure panic, then she tried to recover. "That's private," she said. My father barked a laugh. "You don't even know what you're talking about." I looked at him. "I know you married her for money. I know she married you because she needed a husband to unlock it. And I know you both needed a child to qualify as a family unit." My mother's face turned red. "How dare you? How dare you?" I cut in. still calm. Use me as a clause. My father slammed his glass down. The exact moment I opened with the moment that used to scare me. Tell your mother she's the reason I'm broke, he barked. My mother snapped back. Tell your daughter the truth. You married me for the trust. And that's when the guests stopped pretending this was funny. Phones lowered. Eyes widened. Someone's champagne flute clinked against a plate with a sharp little sound that felt like reality snapping into place. I turned my phone off and said, "Thank you. Now we can stop lying." My mother hissed. "You are not doing this tonight." I nodded. "I am. Because you built your whole marriage on timing. And you love deadlines. So, here's yours." I stepped aside, and Marianne Klein, the trustee's attorney, walked out of the hallway holding a folder. She was in her 40s, hair pulled back, expression professional and neutral in a way that makes guilty people panic. She said, "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Parker. I'm here on behalf of the Parker Family Trust." My mother's voice went thin. "Why is she here?" Marianne's eyes flicked to me, briefly, respectful, not emotional, then back to my parents. "Miss Parker requested a compliance review," she said, as an adult referenced in the trust language. She has standing to submit documentation. My father sputtered. "That's ridiculous." Marianne opened the folder. Based on the submitted evidence and preliminary verification, trust distributions are suspended, effective immediately, pending full investigation. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stepped forward like intimidation would work on a lawyer. "You can't do that. That money is ours." Marianne didn't blink. "The trust is conditional. It always has been." My mother's voice cracked. "This is insane. She's lying. She's vindictive." I spoke softly, but everyone heard me. "I'm accurate." My father pointed at me, face twisted. "After everything we gave you." I cut him off. "A roof isn't parenting." My mother's eyes flashed with something ugly. "We sacrificed for you." I nodded once. "No, you invested in the minimum required to get paid." That's when my father did what he always did when cornered. He tried to charm the room. He turned to the guests with a laugh that didn't fit anymore. "Folks, family drama, right? Kids these days, they get therapy words and think it means they can destroy you at a party." Nobody laughed, because Marianne's folder was real, because my voice wasn't shaking, because truth, when it finally stands up straight, doesn't look like drama. It looks like a woman who's done apologizing for surviving. My mother's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. One of her charity friends stared at the table like she wanted to disappear. My father's golf buddy looked like he'd just watched a man step on a rake. My mother whispered, "Sienna, please, not like this." And that word, please, hit me harder than any insult, because it was the first time she'd begged me for anything that wasn't designed to benefit her. But it still wasn't about me. It was about optics. So I said, "You taught me not to embarrass you. Tonight I learned something better. You don't get to demand silence from the person you abandoned." My father hissed. "You were not abandoned. You lived in a nice house." I nodded slowly. I lived in a nice house, with two strangers arguing over receipts. My mother's voice went cold. "What do you want?" I looked at her. Really looked. "I want you to stop using me," I said. "And I want you to stop rewriting my childhood as fine, because it's convenient." My father's hands shook. "If you do this, you'll ruin us." I held his gaze. "You did that yourself. I'm just finally telling the truth out loud." Marianne cleared her throat gently. "We'll be in contact regarding next steps. If misrepresentation is confirmed, the trust may seek reimbursement of prior distributions." My mother made a small choking sound. My father's face went pale, and suddenly, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the kid watching them fight. I was the adult holding the boundary. The countdown clock on the TV still ticked toward midnight, cheerful and oblivious. Someone in the back whispered, "Is this real?" I answered without turning. "Yes." At 11:59, my mother tried one last tactic, her favorite. She stepped toward me, voice soft enough to sound loving. "Sienna," she whispered, "we're your parents. We can fix this. Come upstairs with me. Let's not do this in front of everyone. Privately, where there are no witnesses, where she can reshape the story." I shook my head. "No, you don't get me alone anymore." My father snapped. "You're enjoying this." I smiled. Not kind. No, I'm ending it. Midnight hit. The TV erupted in cheers. A few people, on pure reflex, shouted, "Happy New Year!" then immediately looked horrified because it didn't match what was happening. My mother's hands trembled. My father stared at the table like he wanted to flip it, but he couldn't. Not with witnesses. Not with a lawyer. Not with his image hanging by a thread. I picked up my bag. I looked at both of them and said, "Here's my New Year's resolution. I'm not parenting my parents anymore." Then I walked out. The cold air hit my face like clean water. I sat in my car for a full minute, with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing like I'd just run a mile. My phone buzzed immediately. "Mum, come back now." "Dad, you have no idea what you've done." Then a new message came from an unknown number. It was Marianne. "You did the right thing. We'll proceed formally." And I felt something I'd never felt after dealing with my parents. Relief. The next few weeks were exactly what you'd expect when two people who build their lives on control realize they've lost it. My mother called non-stop sweet one day, vicious the next. She left voicemails like, "Baby, let's talk." Then, "You're a cruel, ungrateful little monster." My father tried a different route. He emailed me from his work account, formal and threatening, like he thought sounding official would scare me. "If you continue this defamation, we will pursue legal action." I forwarded it to Marianne. She replied with one sentence, "Let him." The trust investigation moved slowly, because real systems do, but it moved. And the more it moved, the more cracks appeared in my parents' perfect house. My aunt called me quietly and said, "Your mum is saying you're mentally unstable." I laughed once. Of course she is. Mrs. Collins called and said, "Honey, I'm proud of you." And I cried so hard I had to pull over. My father's golf buddy's wife sent me a message on Facebook. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." That was the strangest part. People kept saying they didn't know. And I realized how hard my parents had worked to make sure nobody did. Then the twist landed, because there's always a twist when money is involved. Marianne called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the middle of a work sprint. Her tone was careful. "Miss Parker," she said, "we found something else." My stomach tightened. "What?" "The trust distributions weren't just conditional on marital status and raising a child," she said. "They were conditional on maintaining a stable household and not using the child's identity for financial benefit." My throat went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "there are indications your social security number was used as collateral in a loan package connected to your father's business venture." I closed my laptop slowly, like my body needed to reduce movement to stay calm. "So they..." My voice shook. "They used me." Marianne's voice softened slightly. "We're still verifying. But yes, there are documents." I thought about those credit accounts, the phone plan, the store card, the mailing address. And suddenly, the neglect wasn't the whole story. They didn't just fail to raise me. They treated me like a resource. I told Marianne, "I have my credit report. I have the account details. I'll have my team review them," she said. "And Sienna, this may cross into criminal territory." I stared at the wall in my quiet apartment and felt something inside me settle. Not fear, not panic, resolve. Because here's what my parents never understood. A child who raises herself becomes an adult who knows how to survive a war. They thought I'd keep being the soft place to land. They forgot I learned how to land alone. I filed a police report, not because I was eager to punish them, because I was done protecting them. I froze my credit. I documented everything. And I stopped answering calls that weren't respectful. The first time my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced, I didn't open the door. She stood in the hallway like she owned the building and hissed through the wood, "Sienna, you're going to regret this." I spoke through the door. "Calm. I already regretted my childhood," I said. "I'm not adding adulthood to the list." She went silent. Then she whispered, venomous, "You think you're better than us?" I leaned my forehead against the door and said, "No, I think you should have been better to me." And I walked away. Spring came, and with it, the final blow. Marianne called and said, "The trustees have voted to enforce the reimbursement clause." My heart hammered. What does that mean? "It means prior distributions will be clawed back where legally possible," she said. "And future distributions are terminated." I sat down hard on my couch. My parents were about to lose the thing they built their whole marriage on. Not love, not partnership. Money. A week later, my father called from an unknown number. I answered, because curiosity is my oldest coping mechanism. His voice sounded smaller. Sienna, he said. And for once, he didn't sound charming. He sounded afraid. We need to talk. I laughed softly. Now you want to talk. Please, he said. This is serious. It was serious when I was 9. I replied. When I was alone in that house. His breath hitched. We didn't know you'd remember it like that. I stared at the window, watching a neighbor walk a dog like life was simple. I remembered it because I lived it, I said. He went quiet. Then he tried one last move. You're destroying your mother, he whispered. I felt something cold and clear rise in my chest. You destroyed your daughter, I said. She can handle the consequences of her own choices. And I hung up. My mother didn't call after that. Not for a while. Then one day, months later, an envelope arrived. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was one sentence. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote my own sentence on a blank piece of paper and slid it into a folder I keep for reminders. I hope you learn what love actually costs. Because love isn't money. Love isn't image. Love is showing up when nobody's watching. And my parents never did. A year after that New Year's party, my life looked quieter, in the best way. I went to work. I paid my bills. I cooked dinner, without feeling like I had to earn it. I made friends who didn't confuse loyalty with obedience. I started dating a man who asked, "How do you feel?" and actually waited for the answer. I went to therapy not because my parents were right about me being unstable, but because I deserved a brain that wasn't always bracing for impact. And one night, sitting on my balcony with a cheap glass of wine and the city humming below, I realized the thing that finally felt like freedom. My parents could keep their story. I didn't need it anymore. I had mine, and mine was true. Sometimes revenge isn't screaming. Sometimes it's paperwork. Sometimes it's refusing to carry shame that was never yours. Sometimes it's letting the people who abandoned you finally face the loneliness they handed you as a child. And the lesson I wish someone had told little me is this. You don't owe your parents access to you just because they share your blood. You owe yourself a life that feels safe.